All right, so I guess we'll just get started. So I'm Michael, hi, and welcome to the winter projects. Today's going to be like pretty chill. There's going to be pretty minimal coding. It's just going to be like get to know people for the most part, eat pizza, hang out, basically just meet your teammates.
And there's the other bits wherein it's about introduction to the web development side, so in terms of career and also like things to learn in that area.
Yeah. So, yeah. Welcome. The main structure of the, am I on this one? Okay. The main structure of the projects is going to be two-week sprints, so that's June 26 to June 24. And that's just going to be do a bunch of work, we meet up, talk about it, do more things, hopefully done, fingers crossed. And then 2 meetups every week. I think you've all been told this. You would have shown up to the Wednesday session online that we had that was a bit more informal. That's basically how we're going to do them from now on. So Wednesday sessions online, 6 p.m. If you can't attend those, just message us. It's totally fine. They're not mandatory or anything like that. Saturday sessions, so like today, these ones are where we're going to do a lot more stuff together, get things done, hopefully go through code, meeting new people, I suppose, as well. So yeah, that's the plan in general. If you can't ever make any of these sessions, just let us know and we'll just like write it down or whatever, because we have to keep track of who's attending in order to submit your hours to Guild to get your volunteering hours. So that's something we'll eventually do later today as well, is take down the people who are present so we can start tracking who's here for your volunteering hours when we submit them at the end. That's cool with everyone. We'll also be, if you have done like a lot of work on the projects outside of the Saturday sessions, and you want to get recognized for those hours, come to us on the Saturday sessions and tell us, and we can write that down as well and like add extra hours, and we'll like just check your commit history or whatever, just to make sure you're not like submitting 1,000 hours in a week. So yeah, that should be totally fine, I think. If anyone has questions about the volunteering hours stuff, feel free to ask. Yeah, so each Saturday we'll be running workshop sessions. They'll mostly be run by Frinze and a couple other committee members about like the different technical aspects of web development. They should be pretty straightforward. Thing is, you shouldn't wait for a workshop before you start learning that piece of technology. So we have a very short time frame because it's winter break, of course. So it's going to be pretty self-driven. So if there's something you need to do, like go on YouTube. I'm pretty sure everyone's like started, managed to find some YouTube video for their to-do app, I'm sure.
In terms of the workshop, so I acknowledge the fact that my workshops are not going to be the best out there in the internet. That's the reason why I really want you to look into the internet, see what's actually out there. What I will be presenting in the workshops are like brief overviews on things that you may or may not know, because some tutorials won't cover this, or in other cases wherein the workshops will encompass topics a little bit about everything, so that it gives you a little bit of some knowledge onto what to search in YouTube or the internet.
Yeah, so just to follow on from that, I'm sure you probably saw in the original acceptance email, we recommended some resources. Jerry's used it more than I have, or you've looked into it, which is the Frontend Masters course, provided for free to you if you register as a student with GitHub. So the GitHub student pack, you just get like a ton of free things, which is pretty nice. So definitely look into that. If you haven't seen that already, it's on the original acceptance email at the bottom. And they do pretty good tutorials. So yeah. Later on in the days on Saturdays, we'll have a few like more like mentoring type people come in. They'll have a lot more experience. How many people did we contact? I can't remember off the top of my head. eight or seven people who have like worked in industry or like have more extensive experience. Come in, help you out, you know, chat to them, talk about whatever you like to talk about. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. All right. So the current general gist or plan for the workshops, the first one today is going to be the introduction to web development. That's going to be later on today, after all the icebreakers. Then we'll have a practical software engineering practices workshop. Frinze knows the details of all these, so if you want to ask him about them, feel free to ask. Yeah. So typical code-based structure, front-end, back-end, like how things fit together, how it all works. And then we also have a variety of like specific skill-based workshops for like different particular things in web development. And I'm sure you can read those. It's pretty straightforward. Cool. And now we'll just like go around the room, introduce yourselves. We'll first introduce ourselves as committee, and then we can get to know you guys. So I'm Michael Nefidovis, Michael Neff on Discord. I'm the current president of Coders for Causes, second year uni, doing, can't give that one away. Yeah, and I joined in my first year after high school. I was like, all right, let's do something over this like massive break. So I Google searched like how to do web development, and then I joined Coders for Causes, and it's been pretty fun since. Yeah, and cool. Frinze, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yep. So I'm Frinze Aaron Lapus. My background, I currently work as a systems engineer at Lottery West, and I work as a research engineer at Database System Health Lab. I currently am on my final year of study of software engineering and data science, but I'm actually thinking of switching to part-time because full-time work. In terms of something about me is that I joined the CFC on my first year on the Home to Health project. I guess at first I was an arrogant person, you know, like I thought I knew it all, but like, you know, my mentor in the Coders for Causes, he slapped me in the face and said, nah, you don't know it all. You gotta learn these things and see how it all fits together, you know. So I guess in some extent I learned to take my pride away to actually just, you know, learn and accept the fact that in the web development side, there's always things to learn, and you're never in a place wherein you know so much things that you don't have time to learn. So yeah, I guess that's me.
Okay, I'm Ivy. I'm the marketing officer. So my background, I am in my master's doing software engineering. I did comp sci undergrad as well. Interesting. Okay, I'm gonna say I joined CFC last year in summer doing BFA, and I was like, this is great, so I decided to join committee.
Hi everyone, my name is Ash. I'm a first year student at UWA. I'm studying computer science and software engineering. I might be working on the food bank project, or the waste one. And one interesting thing about myself is that I got into web development when I looked at my primary school's website, and it was like kind of not good. So I decided to try remake a better one myself, and I showed it to my school, and they said they would put it up on exhibition, and that never happened. But yeah, that's when I got into web development. Cool, that's it.
Hi, I'm Dev. I'm a committee member. I'm a first year student at UWA. I have experience in cybersecurity. So I've done an advanced diploma at TAFE, and I've been working in the field for 2 years currently. And yesterday was my last day, so I can focus on CFC. So apart from that, what's my background? I'm from Mauritius. I was born there, moved when I was 8, and the rest is history, I guess. Which project I'll be assigned to? I guess I'll be on the food bank. And one thing about myself, or one interesting thing about myself, is I can't code.
Thank you for introducing yourselves, everyone. So I guess in some extent we know each other. But I guess another question that I'd like to point out is, who is the Coders for Causes, or what is the Coders for Causes? So I guess if you read the description on our website, so we're basically a student club run a club that is run by students that's providing digital solutions to nonprofit organizations and charities. But I think something that has to be pointed out there is the fact that the Coders for Causes is a community. So I think the biggest part that you're gonna get here by being in this program is that you get connections with the different people out here. So like probably here in Perth it's actually very small to the point that you go to one company and probably there's another guy that knows you as well. So I just like to point out that this is a community. So if you ever feel like you're not getting things correctly, you should just ask people around you. Maybe they're having the same problem as well. So yeah, I guess that's the Coders for Causes. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So yeah, that's definitely true. Like I know, at least when I joined, I was sort of like fish out of water, just doing like random web dev stuff, and then like joining CFC like really like made me, I don't know, more invested in web development as we go forward. So yeah. Another thing I'll mention is that this year we had like an insane number of applicants for these projects. So all of you guys are definitely like at the very top or like very, very good at what you have been doing. So we're definitely very interested to talk to you. I'm sure you'll all get along like super well. So yeah. All right, so that's that. So now what we're going to do, we're going to do a couple of icebreakers and then, you know, just chat, whatever. So I'll explain the concept of the first one. If my Oh, true. Yeah. So the first thing is we need to get people's permission to do photographs. So if you are not happy with getting a photograph taken or like don't want your photograph shown, that sort of thing, just tell us privately. That's totally fine. We'll sort that out. Another thing is dietary requirements. We're going to be ordering pizza for lunch, which should be pretty good. And of course, if you have dietary requirements, please let us know so we can like order for you. So yeah, just come to us privately after now or later. Yeah. So if anyone has any dietary requirements or like doesn't want a photo, just come up, talk to us. Keep mingling amongst yourselves, and then we'll do an icebreaker in a sec. Okay, cool. Hey there, boy. What's up? Okay. Cheese?
Wait, no cheese?
Slash, yeah.
Okay.
What piece do you know I got the you?
So, yeah. Take it away, Frinze.
Yep.
The web.
So I guess this is the introduction to web development. So the web development sector is probably one of the biggest part of software. There's a lot of web developers out there that are building applications that are deployed and accessible to the entire world. So anywhere you are in the world. So the goal of this workshop is to help the people here understand the web development landscape at a high level point of view, and also like how the technologies fit together. And yes, so throughout the winter break, you're going to expect that you're going to touch at least some of these technologies, maybe not in a deeper level, but at least you're aware of it, that it exists, and what's it used for. Yep. So the outline for this workshop, so we have what and why web dev, a couple of frequently asked questions in web dev, the basics of the web technology and its limitations. So basically this is the front end stuff, and then you have your server-side applications. And then the other part of this workshop is the other tools and technologies that you're going to see in the web development side. But actually, not just web development. You're going to see it in other software development as well, may it be mobile or digital embedded systems. Yes, firstly, what and why web development? So firstly, web development is when we create websites and web applications. So when we say web applications, I guess it's a little bit harder to understand, but think about it like a mobile application, you know? Like it's something that you install, and when you click something, the feel of it is like a native application. So a web application is similar to a mobile application, except web application can be accessed like a website. So not all websites are web applications, but all web applications are websites, if that makes sense. Alright. So why web development in an aspect? So firstly, is the accessibility and the portability of tools and technologies. So if you think about it, websites and web applications you can access them like really easily. Like you just type in a URL in the browser and then bam, you're there. You can use it. So if you think about mobile applications on the other hand, or maybe game applications. So the usual way to do it is that you go to maybe Steam or Play Store and then you download, and that's the only time you could actually use the apps. So that's one of the power of web development, is that you have the accessibility and portability. The next one is career and on-demand job market. I'm going to talk about that in the next slide. Next one is the huge possibility to combine the web applications that you build with emerging technologies. Maybe you want an IoT, so an IoT applications wherein you have sensors, for example, like the E-zone sensors here in this building. You can actually access that in a website somewhere. Machine learning, you could also employ tech, let's say for example, with Google, I presume, with the Google Maps wherein they have sensors and all sorts of data around the maps. Then they deploy that in Google Maps. Let's say for example, I want to get from one place to another place, I have that option. And it's also used in a lot of different industry, like for example the health side. So just recently with Tesla Purple, they created a application that can be accessed in ambulances that can route them directly to the nearest hospitals. So that's an example of applications that are used in a real-world industry. So I guess the web development industry. So I guess the biggest part of it is the career. There was this survey that was done in the Stack Overflow in 2016, and it's also posted in that link. This is what you will typically see in the developer's occupation side. Majority of them will be full stack web developers. And if you don't know what full stack web developers are, they're basically web developers across the entire infrastructure. They're doing frontends, they're doing backends, they're doing database systems. And then you have backend web developers, you have student developers, mobile devs, desktop. So the point is, the good thing about the web development sector is that you never really run out of job to do because it's really on demand in the market. Like for me, I'm a systems engineer at LotOS. I build applications that are actually deployed in web. But even if you're not going to go to the web development sector, it's still useful to know. Let's say, for example, with digital embedded systems, so people that create sensors and things, usually they want to connect their sensor or their electronics to the internet. And that's, at an extent, it's also part of web development. You also have the DevOps engineers. DevOps engineers are usually engineers that are responsible for deploying infrastructures. So if somebody wants a server deployed, they're the people to talk to. So in some extent, almost a lot of things in the software side is connected to the web development side. Next, frequently asked questions in web dev. So I'm sure that you've seen out there in the wild, we have WordPress, Drupal, and Wix. These are basically websites that lets you create more websites by just doing drag and drops. So I guess it's kind of not intuitive to know, like, if I can create websites with just drag and drop tools, then why bother coding it? So I guess to point out the facts is that these three websites, these three platforms, are specialized in what's called content management systems. So when you deal with website that just wants to display informations, well, that's where you actually go to this website, where it's just easy, you drag and drop and things. But the thing with these platforms or tools is the fact that there's a lot of limitations on the themes and templates that we use, and technically it's difficult to extend. So if you think about it, what if I want a website that gets some data in the NASA's public data sets or APIs? And I'm going to talk about APIs in a later workshop, but think about it like there's some data out there that NASA just exposed to the internet and they want people to use it. So how can you create a website that actually just uses that data that they have? Well, firstly, you're not going to be able to build a website, as far as I know, with WordPress, Drupal, or Wix just by calling in some data in another website. Because if you think about it, that part contains some heavy logic. Like, you want to get some data over someplace, and then you want to manipulate the data in such a way that you're going to create a user interface. That's not something you could do with drag and drops, at least not that I'm aware of at this moment. That's the reason why I'm saying that it's difficult to extend. The other part is cybersecurity. Because if you think about it with WordPress, if the major people that actually use it are non-technical people, so the audience that hackers want to get into systems are usually at this line of field. Because like non-technical people are managing it, and also the fact that if they get a vulnerability at one platform, every other websites that use that tool is vulnerable. Aye. So I know that going back to this outline, there's a lot of tools and technologies probably to learn, and I'm sure while you're in the internet, you've been looking at HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, Vue, and all sorts of other things, Git and stuff that you might not know of. Like, don't be afraid. For now, just think about it like there's a black box out there that you don't need to explore until you actually get there. So don't be overwhelmed by that fact. So I guess that brings us to the next frequently asked questions. So what is the best way to learn this? So I'm just going to play a video here because this has been expressed by Fireship. Yep. So I hope that makes sense. So the thing is, there's a lot of developers out there that just says they want to get to web development, and they're gonna ask what should they learn? Well, there's actually a lot of things to learn, but your best way to learn is actually not just going through all of them and just reading a lot of course on how to use them. Perhaps it's a better way to just think about an idea that you have, a project that you want to build for yourself. A project maybe you want to help your family, your mother, your dad about a problem that they have, you know? The good thing about it is the fact that it makes your skill aligned to problem solving. And that's actually what's an important aspect of being a software engineer, is that we build applications with cool technologies, not because for the sake that we want to say it's cool, but we build it so that we could solve real world problems. So I guess, to summarize that, what's the best way to learn this? Yeah, you do personal projects, something that inspires you, something that motivates you. Another thing is that you do team projects. The good thing about team projects is that you get peer reviews, and you can correct bad practices straight away. Let's say, for example, if you never notice, is the fact that you might have been splitting your functions too early. And I mean that, you know that in coding practices, like they say to make your functions really small as possible, but that's not really a good practice. That's only like a general rule of thumb. You're going to know that or practice that if you work with team members, wherein you want a code that's not just readable to you, but readable to everyone that's working on the code base. And I guess the next one is to watch online courses to figure out what is available. So the thing with online courses is that you learn what is available in that particular technologies, but in our workshops, probably something that you might notice is the fact that we're aligned to pointing you out to the right directions, resources that you could use to learn, and also how different resources fit together and connect. I guess another frequently asked question, not in the web development, but in the CFC, is that why does CFC not do mobile development as much as web development? I guess there's a couple of points out there. Firstly is the app stores have developer costs, and as a student-run club, we don't really have an ongoing or annual fee for basically budgeting for that kind of. It's easier to deal with web technologies, as in the learning barrier to actually get somebody working in mobile development is actually higher than in web development, because in mobile you have to learn all about simulators and emulators for mobile stuff as well. But if you think about it, it's the fact that with React Native is like the equivalent version of React. React Native is a technology for creating user interfaces in mobile applications, and React is a web application library that's used for building user interfaces in the web application side. So if you take a look at the code base of both sides, it doesn't really make much of a difference. So don't feel like you're missing out if you're going with web development and you want to become a mobile developer someday. That's just something I want to point out. Next is accessibility. So I think I've mentioned this before. With the thing with accessible websites is the fact that you can access it from a phone. You could access websites and sensors, access it in tablets, laptops, and PCs. So that's just how websites and web applications connect the globe around us. And another thing is the bigger open source community. And what I mean by bigger open source community is that when you have problems, there's a higher chance that there's someone out there in the internet is having the same problem as you did. So there's going to be more Stack Overflow questions and answers. There's going to be more GitHub issues with answers, which just makes the learning easier, per se. Now, I guess that's the frequently asked questions. Now, we go to the basics of web and limitations. Now, so, firstly, the front end. So the front end really refers to the user interface and interactions of the users. I guess the terminology front end and back end is not exactly intuitive. Most people would say front end is what the user sees, and yes, that's correct to a certain degree, and the back end is something that the user cannot see. So there's really three main web technologies out there, and for I guess the front end, we have the HTML, CSS, JavaScript. HTML is the hypertext markup language. It basically describes the structure of your web page. So like for example with this one, it's just a square. I have a couple of elements. It's there. And then CSS describes the presentation of a particular structure of the HTML. So maybe I have two elements, actually three elements. I have the smile, the two eyes. You could use CSS to actually create or move certain elements so you can present it better. The next one, JavaScript. It's used to program the complex features on a web page, so mainly on the interaction sides. So this is the part where it gets a little bit tricky, because JavaScript, you may not know how it works, as in like when it's on the front end, it does data loading and all sorts of things, which the user may classify as they cannot see as the loading, but that's still part of front end, because anything related to interactions and anything related to something that happens at the end device. So if it happens on the browser, it's called front end. It's part of front end development. So JS, all about interactions. So in this example, you could have a couple of shapes lying around, and you want some events on arrow keys and also physics motions. That's also part of JavaScript. But there's a lot of problems with just the current web technologies. So as you might have known in the web development space, why do we have React, why do we have Vue, and all other frameworks? So to answer that question, it's like, so to point out the other question is that, why not just build websites using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript? Why bother using all the other frameworks? So I guess to point out some of these things, which will be covered in their specific workshops. The HTML, it doesn't really handle content well. It's not a programming language. It doesn't do variables or calculation. It's just merely structure of and content. CSS, well, most CSS is quite similar. It's also not very dynamic, and also the fact that I don't know about you, but CSS is probably one of the hardest thing that I have to do as a full stack web developer. Like, I do not like the fact that certain elements, like I have a hard time sometimes just doing positionings and margining. So that's yeah, how to center a div.
Yeah, Frinze, how do I center a div?
Flexbox. Or the alternative way is that also another thing to point out is that a lot of people don't like to go to the web development side because they don't know how to do front end. And I've met a lot of people that says that they don't want to do web development because they don't want to be creating websites because they're not good at building good-looking interfaces. So in my experience, actually, I'm a systems engineer. I create applications, internal softwares. The presentation side and making the website look pretty is not actually a priority on me. It's more on the fact that it's easy to use. It doesn't necessarily have to look best. So it's something to point out. That's the reason why we have CSS libraries and CSS frameworks out there. I think you might, if you talk to me, I might have already suggested you to look into Bootstraps or Material UI, Materialize. So that's basically kind of taking away the CSS part so that you focus on content and logic. Next, JS, it has the capability to modify the user interface, but it becomes really tedious to modify the interface. And if you take a look at JavaScript, is that you can use JavaScript to build HTML. So every time you have to query data or get data from a server or something, it's just gonna be harder because like you have to load the data and then you have to update the interface. That's actually more on the next workshops, but to give you a little bit of spoiler there is that JavaScript, what it does is that it binds your user interface to the data. So that whenever your data changes, your user interface changes. You don't have to manually change your user interface. Yep, I think I discussed this in an extent. Websites can be much more. They can be web applications. They're basically an app in a website. Yep. So the modern frameworks, there's a couple of them. You have React.js, which is more mature and used more in the industry. It was developed by Facebook. Vue.js, it grows fast in its popularity. It's developed by the open source community. So currently it has, it's popular, but like it's not as used as I've seen it in the industry, just because there's a fair bit of bigger community with React. But still, both are good to use and learn, and the knowledge is transferable when you move from frameworks to frameworks. So like the logic that you use for React.js will also apply to Vue.js. Okay. Not always, but there's a huge part of it. Yes. Okay. So now that's the front end bit. So the front end, user interfaces and user interaction. And also probably some sort of data loading, because that's part, anything related to code that runs in the client's browser is part of front end. So if it runs on the mobile, it runs on this laptop, it's front end. So we move into server-side applications or backend. So this is the usual structure of this is the usual infrastructure or architecture of any web applications. You have your user interfaces, phones, tablets, laptops, PCs, connecting to the internet, and then it connects to some sort of server applications, and that server is connected to a database. And there are a lot of frameworks that does it. You have Node.js, which is a JavaScript. So I guess going back to JavaScript, it's a language that's used widely in the web, used most of the time in the front end side. But some genius out there thought, why don't we just use JavaScript for the backend as well? So Node.js is there. You have Django, which is actually a pretty good Python framework. It's developed like around 19 something. but it had a lot of support and also a lot of versions that changed over time. And also database systems and PHP is there.
Why don't you like PHP?
Well, I guess to what Jerry pointed out, why don't I like PHP? I had a very bad experience with PHP. And I think a lot of developers have as well. I started my career in web applications and actually web development, and I hated it. I hated the web development side as a matter of fact because of the fact that I'm using PHP, front end and things. When I joined CFC is when I got introduced to React and all sorts of other modern frameworks with David Yu, my mentor. So yeah, that's the reason why in my introduction I said that he kind of slapped me in the face and then he said, "You're doing it wrong." That's basically the reason why, I'm still in the web development side, even though I hated it at first. Yep. So I guess, how do devices communicate? So usually you're going to have a device that sends a request towards the server, and the server fetches some data, and then goes back to the devices. So yeah, what do server applications or backends do? So firstly, they can serve front ends. So if you think about it, if a device goes to a particular website, then where does the HTML, CSS, and JavaScript come from? Well, it comes from the server that actually serves it. So this is the part of the backend serving files towards the client device, so they can run applications there. Next is web APIs, so application programming interface. So the easy way to explain API is that if you think about it, user interface, who interacts with the interface? Can anybody answer that? If I have a user interface, who interacts with the interface? The user. If I have an application programming interface, then who interacts with the interface? Yes, that's basically the easy way to explain web APIs is the fact that if you think about it, we have applications that runs on our browsers and things, and they want to get some form of data to the server. So they get their data through what's called the application programming interface, and the data usually comes from a database. Probably some guy will ask the question, why don't we just have our app in our devices directly connect to the database? Well, that's actually a huge cybersecurity flaw, because if the client application is directly connected to the database, they can just delete everything. So that's basically where server comes from, so that they protect the database in an extent. Next, they also are particularly responsible for processing requests. So if you're sending emails or SMS, and you basically want a website that you type something and then you fill up a form, submit, and then it sends SMS towards somebody's phone. So the way how it works is that I have my client device, I send the data towards the server, and then the server says, this has this particular endpoint and parameters, so we send SMS from there. Next, you could also do machine learning in the server side. Yep, databases. So I think the terminology database is really intuitive. It's a place where you store data. So there's really two ways to do it. You could either go with the SQL pathway, and there's a lot of them, Postgres, Microsoft SQL Server. They're typically faster and better for large amounts of data or systems that needs data consistency and reliability. The other one is NoSQL databases, such as MongoDB. They allow for database design to be modified without a schema. My image cut that out, but basically, MongoDBs or NoSQL database are particularly good at handling data that cannot be represented in a tabular format, or you want to do some fast prototyping. because with MongoDB or NoSQL is that you don't follow a schema, which means that when you change, because early on in your project or prototyping, you're going to change the schema a lot depending on your use case. So that's where NoSQL comes in. Now there you go. Modified without complex migrations. Okay. I guess with the others, I think there's a lot of content already in the couple of slides. It's the others. I guess we should start. The languages in the web, these are the usual language that you're going to see. You have Python, which is for Django and Flask. So usually, if you want to incorporate machine learning models or artificial intelligence, you know that Python has a big data science community. So Django and Flask are frameworks that are used to create server applications. So that's actually what we're going to use in the Waste project, because it's going to be later incorporated with a computer vision project. That's the reason why we're not using JavaScript for that side. But JavaScript has a tons of use as well in the language in the web. Firstly, it's the language that you're going to go for if you're dealing with front-end frameworks. Next one is that you might want to build server applications with JavaScript as well. That's where Node.js and Express comes in. And then there's also these other languages that you might have heard of: Ruby, Go, Rust, and C. So yeah, just something to be aware of. But the main focus probably would be on JavaScript. Next one is hosting stuff. So once you get your HTML, CSS, and JavaScript bundle or your front-end frameworks and you're ready to build a website, you want your website to be deployed somewhere so that people can actually use it. So this is where the hosting stuff comes in. And there's a lot of ways to do it. You could own a server and expose a port on that particular server to serve a service. You could use third-party platforms. So I think this is where the future is going. We're in cloud, so you're going to see AWS, Azure, Heroku. Raspberry Pi is out there if you're going to want to build a server in a small thing. DigitalOcean, Netlify, and Vercel. So a couple of things that you might be interested of when you start wanting to host your applications. Next, the CSS frameworks. So, I guess this is the JS and CSS frameworks. So the front end, so you have Vue, React, Nux, and Next.js. I'm not going to talk about that in the later workshops, but I'm just putting it in this slide so that if you're curious, take a look into it. To just summarize what these are, just Nux.js is with Vue, Next.js is with React. Front end, CSS. So as I've said in a couple of slides, is that there's a lot of web developers out there that are not particularly good at building user interfaces, but majority of their focus is that there's a user interface and it's easy to use. So that's where you're going to use Material UI or Vuetify for that one. Now we move on to developer tools. TypeScript is one of the developer tools, which is basically a better JavaScript per se. It allows type checking, and it's useful for complex apps. It allows for better JavaScript developer tooling, so you're going to have a lot of IntelliSense. And I'm not sure if you know about IntelliSense, but it's basically like something like autocomplete when you type something. So you type maybe, I want to sort something, I type SO, and then it'll just come up with sort, and then I can press tab to use it. And also read documentation. That's where TypeScript comes in, because there's only a couple of elements or types that actually supports it. Yeah, it can be annoying if you're new at it. So for the beginners out here in the room, I don't recommend learning TypeScript first. Actually, just build something that actually just motivates you, and also like only use it when the time comes. Like when your project or when you're working at a professional software development industry, wherein you're going to be working with a lot of people, such that you need your code base to be documented and actually something that will last for like a very long time. For a quick project and also something that you build for your personal, you probably only have like a couple of times, and like you only want to build it not for something that will last for 10 years. You probably only want to build it for like, hey, I want the satisfaction of building it for like maybe a year or less than that, a month.
Of the food bank.
I'm not sure about food bank. You're going to be leading that one.
Oh no.
Testing. So testing is a very important aspect. I think I'm going to cover it in a little briefly later in the later workshops. But automated testings are very important in what we do in softwares. The reason for that is the fact that our softwares grow bigger day by day of development. And after a couple of months and a couple of years, there's so much features in the applications that to just manually test certain things will probably take a day. That's the reason why we have such thing as automated testings, to make sure that the features that we write will be correct and also will continue to be correct. And the reason why I say will continue to be working correctly is because usually we extend these features such that we write over existing code, and we might change the wrong thing and it breaks something that used to work before. So there's Selenium, Cypress, which is end-to-end automated testing tools, and I highly recommend you to actually look into one of them. You're going to see a video recording wherein it's like a human that's just pressing buttons, typing something, but this is all automated. You also have the other testing frameworks for your unit testing. You have Jest, Mocha, PyTest. And yes, testing is vital to any software projects.
I can't remember what it was, but I remember during one of the interviews, someone mentioned they had used Selenium, which is like a testing framework for doing like web automation. So that's pretty cool. Like you can automate things using like a testing framework, because the whole purpose is basically just click on random places on the website until the website breaks, pretty much.
Yeah. And that brings in to the continuous integration and continuous development. So I've said the automated testing, but I think I'll cover this in later workshops. But if you think about testing, it's the fact that you can technically run automated testing for every change that you make in the code, which means that you could easily point out where a certain change will cause a particular defect in your software, a bug. So there are event-driven scripts. You're going to have GitHub Actions and pipelines. Later on in the practical software engineering practices, we're going to be seeing GitHub Actions there. Yep, browsers. We have the standard browsers, Google Chrome, Firefox, Edge, etc. When developing something for the web, you might also want to think about backward compatibility, because there are some users out there that are still using old browsers, to the point that if you load your websites there, it's not as what you expect it to be. Like for example, maybe there's a website that doesn't support a pop-up dialog, for example. And if you create a website that relies on that particular pop-up to appear, then basically that website cannot be used in that old browser. Other things to take note of is responsiveness. So when we build website, we usually build websites that you want to see in laptops, PCs, but you also have to think about mobile devices, wherein they don't have the same screen size. You might also want to take a look into screen readers for accessibilities. Okay, the Firefox developer tools. So I think some of you are familiar with this one. So whenever you're developing applications not working as it seems, you should press F12 or right click and then inspect element to actually see what's going on. There's a lot of things right here. You have page inspectors so that you can see the layout of the website and also the stylings. You also have the web console to actually debug certain things when bugs are happening. It's like, for example, maybe I want to know if I click this button, it executes a function. So maybe I could put a console log in that function that it's assigned to. And also, here's something that you can do in web as well, is the responsive design mode. So when you click this button here, it will basically turn your website into something that can be viewed in a mobile applications. So that's in an extent, that's how we build websites that also works for mobile devices. Yep, and there's also a lot more tools here. JavaScript debugger, network monitoring, which is used for monitoring the interaction between your front end and back end, performance tools, rulers, color pickers, and there's a lot more there. Next one is package managers. It has its own workshop, probably like around next week, which is about, so package managers are some of the bits that are very important in the software development. The reason for this is because majority of the time, you're going to be using libraries or codes that are written by developers out there. And the thing about this one is that they're taking the hard work away from you so that you can focus on the business logic side. That is something that's specific to you, specific to your problem, so you could solve it. So package managers are responsible for installing libraries that can be used. And for some of you, you might be familiar with this one as code shortcuts like npm run start. So if you look at package JSON, you're going to see a lot more in like the scripts and also dependencies out there. I'll be covering that in another workshop. Next one, version controls. It's essential for developer teams and also for complex software development because it enables you to have different versions of your software, and also it allows concurrent development of different developers. So traditionally in the past, when we were all beginner developers, we're probably sharing codes in Facebook Messengers, Google Drive. Well, the problem that you might encounter is the fact that you have to wait for one guy to actually change something, and then they upload it before you can actually modify that. So that's just something to be aware of, and if you read in advance, take a look into Git in YouTube. Next, linters and formatters. So the purpose of linters and formatters is that they make your code formatting consistent. It follows a particular standard. So may it be that your code uses single quotes or double quotes for the strings. You might think it's a little bit pedantic, but the good thing about linters and formatters is the fact that, firstly, they make your code consistent across everything. But it also helps when you're doing Git. So when we take a look at code, we usually see the difference that happens. And usually, we want to focus on the difference that actually matters. And we don't want to focus on differences such as like somebody presses Control S and then it shifts the entire spacing around. It's just going to cause a massive headache in terms of the difference in code. Next, teamwork. Well, there's many tools out there for facilitating teamwork in the team. So it's used to stop teams from stepping on each other's toes. So you have GitHub issues and pull requests. This will be talked about in other workshops as well. Alright, my final slide, the word of encouragement. So I can admit that this journey, the learning will be difficult and can sometimes be overwhelming. As you've seen in today's workshop, there's so many out there to learn and things. And please feel free, if at any point of the project you feel that you don't know enough or if you're feeling lost, please reach out because we're all in this journey together, you know. As I've said earlier in the introduction, the Coders for Causes, it's not just some place that you go and listen to workshops and code. It's a community that we build around. So that's the reason why we focus today in a lot of networking and also like making people know of each other, because here in the university, we're building networks here and probably somewhere out there in the track wherein you're going to be working with people that you've seen before. So yeah, please feel free to actually reach out, because majority of the time, the people here don't know what they're doing as well. Or if they do, they're going to help you. But in the case of if I ask somebody and they don't know it as well, well, that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable, because it makes me feel like I'm not the only one who knows it. So I can learn it and also probably share the knowledge. So yeah, nobody is born talented. Skills are honed with determination and willingness to learn. So when I was a first-year student entering on the CFC winter project, I didn't feel like I was good enough. I couldn't create a good-looking interfaces. I didn't know how to use NPM and all sorts of things. And I would say if in that point I just gave up, just because of all the things that I didn't know, then I wouldn't be here today, wherein I have a career out there, wherein I'm building actually softwares that makes an impact to companies and also have values. If I just gave out there because of all the self-doubts and things that I didn't know, I guess I wouldn't be here today as well, helping you on this journey. So I admit that during that time I was lucky because I had CFC. I had connections where I can just ask questions instead of just feeling lost of not knowing. So as I've said, please do leverage that opportunity to reach out with people in this room and also reach out with the project helpers that we have. You being in this project not only gives you the opportunity to raise your talents, but you also unlock one of the biggest factors of the growth of your career, and that is the connections with your fellow software engineers. Yep, that's the end.